Prisoner held hostage by ISIS is dead, this time a 26-year-old American aid worker. We talk about it tonight. From New York City, this is the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, and on our panel tonight, he's the co-host of Steele and Unger on Sirius XM Radio, Rick Unger. She's a powerhouse attorney from the city of brotherly love. Heather Hansen is here. And he's a former FBI special agent and Navy SEAL, as well as the founder and CEO of United States Continued Service, LLC. Jonathan Gilliam joins us. Interesting crew we've got here tonight. And thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's go right to the Daily Download. Well, I wish I could say this news is shocking, but sadly, no more, it isn't. ISIS-held American prisoner Kayla Mueller is dead. Just 4 days ago, ISIS announced that Kayla was killed as a result of an American airstrike against the terrorist group. As of now, we don't know exactly how she died. What we do know is that responsibility falls squarely on ISIS. It didn't take long for the president to denounce the killing. The commander-in-chief showing his outrage by having the White House press office release a statement. And here it is. The press release, first 4 paragraphs talk about how amazing Kayla's life was, and it was, which is certainly true. But only the last paragraph addresses ISIS. Quote, ISIL is a hateful and abhorrent terrorist group whose actions stand in stark contrast to the spirit of people like Kayla. On this day, we take comfort in the fact that the future belongs not to those who destroy, but rather to the irrepressible force and human goodness that Kayla Mueller shall forever represent. And that's it. The president once again comes off as weak, as disinterested. Perhaps he thinks this ISIS thing really isn't that big of a deal. I have to replay this video from yesterday. It really is telling of what the president thinks of the war on terror.
Do you think the media sometimes overstates the sort of level of alarm people should have about terrorism and this kind of chaos as opposed to a longer term problem of climate change and epidemic disease?
Absolutely. And, I don't blame the media for that. What's the famous saying about local newscasts, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? You show crime stories and you show fires, because that's what folks watch. It's all about ratings.
It's all about ratings. This ain't American Idol. I have a feeling that video is going to haunt Mr. Obama forever. Rick, you're a big fan of the president. You have to admit that this response via a press release as opposed to going in front of cameras comes off as weak.
I think weak is a dramatic overstatement. Look, the problem that we have now, and I should say up front, I actually am very supportive of re-examining our policy. I am very much for getting much tougher with ISIL. I'll just say that at the outset. But, I've spent most of the day today listening to people tearing apart little parcels and bits of what the president said yesterday. It's not what he says, it's what he does. I don't like that he won't use the phrase Islamic terrorist. I think he should. If you go in there and you commit an act of terrorism while you're yelling Allah Akbar, it's Islamic terrorism. So let's just say it.
You said though, what he does. He didn't go in front of a camera today. What's with the press release?
You know what? He probably doesn't want to have to go in front of a camera every single time something terrible like this happens.
You're saying it might be an overreaction.
Well, I'm not saying it's an overreaction. I'm saying that it doesn't help the situation. Frankly, what I think would help the situation if people will stop with the stupid criticism, focus on the policy. If you got a beef with the policy, you should bring it up and let's push the White House to look at the policy. But let's not with the stupid stuff, and that's what I've been hearing all day.
Heather.
Don't you think if there was more action, there'd be less criticism of his words? He just doesn't do anything. There's been no real action.
He's killed more terrorists than any president ever.
But when it comes to ISIS, he's done very little, and he's talked very little. And I don't have a problem with what he did today. I think that was probably in respect to the family, who probably would prefer that type of response. And I also think that in this particular circumstance, given the nature of her death allegedly by the airstrikes, it was a proper response. The stuff that he said yesterday and everything that he has said leading up to this point is just not strong enough. And if you're not going to speak strongly, you better act strongly.
What would be different? And what would you do differently than what he's doing with ISIL?
I think he needs to get a group together that would do something more proactive.
What?
I don't know.
Well,
I
then
don't
you can't
pretend
I
to
think
say
what
that.
Rick is leading towards is, would you agree to ground troops?
Yeah,
in
because
Syria
if
and
not,
Iraq?
what are you complaining
And I'm
about?
going to actually,
I actually would.
John,
I would too.
John, I want you to answer that question because obviously you have a little more experience in this.
Sure.
regard.
So I think your quote just a second ago was he's killed more
Right.
terrorists than any president. Okay. So if you're going to eradicate roaches from a house, right? I could kill more roaches than anybody else if I don't kill them all or push them back to a manageable number. Doesn't matter.
That's
They're
fair.
going to come back.
That's fair.
What
but you
needs-
can't say he hasn't done anything.
Well, he hasn't done anything effectively. And see, here's the problem: is that there is a DOD full of executives that cow down to the president, to the administration, to a group of people who run this country that know how to get reelected. They don't know how to run a war. We need war fighters, and those war fighters need to come up with a plan that targets fundamental Islamic Mohammedism. That's what this is. It is not
Can you
radical.
define what
evil
Mohammedanism
people.
is?
Yeah,
Mohammedanism-
this is evil
I haven't
people.
heard
what
that
this
too often.
is.
Fundamental Islamic Mohammedanism is the same Islam that Muhammad himself practiced. These are the same tactics. It's just 1,000 years later, and they have a lot more technology. The same thing happened 100 years ago this year to Armenians in Turkey, where they killed half of all Armenians that were on the face of this earth. 1.5 million gone. They're never going to come back. Same tactics that Muhammad used, same tactics being used now.
That sounds
Can
like
I make a
genocide.
point? Here's the reality of it. This is why people have to get together and stop with the silly talk. I'm not saying what you said was silly talk. I think all three of us agree, sitting here, that we should probably have boots on the ground and go for it. Kill these evil people.
Look what happened in
But let
in
me finish the
Kuwait.
point. I understand, but let me finish the point. The point is, the American public so far doesn't want that. And put yourself in the shoes of the president for a minute. You've got an overwhelming percentage of the public saying don't do it. The three of us agree he should, but you've got the public saying not to. What would you do?
Can I say this? And Heather, I want you to agree with me or not on this. The American public is by and large okay with what is effective.
That's right.
And if the president makes a decision to put boots on the ground and he does it correctly, which was done in Kuwait, they will be behind it. That's
Well,
the
they
Well,
are
and
so
I think,
far.
when you say what would
They may
you
be.
do,
Last
what would
word,
you do?
Heather.
I would ask someone who knows, and I think that that's what we need to do. We need to get together
he's got
people
the
who
military
have
for that.
the means to make this something happen.
He's got the military for that. They're supposed to know.
Right, but that's what they need to do. They need to, exactly what John said, they need to put together a group who actually will go in and take care of this problem.
And that would have to be the last word. The only thing I would say is that I would like to see a poll now saying, do we need boots on the ground in terms
will.
of taking out ISIL?
I agree.
We'll see about that. Anyway, coming up next, drama from the Supreme Court over gay marriage in Alabama. We've got the details next. And a little later, an all-girls college in Pennsylvania opening its doors to diversity. You'll never guess who they're letting in. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Concha from New York City. As we mentioned yesterday on the show, the Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling allowing gay marriage to take place in Alabama, of all places, making it the 37th state to allow gay marriage. What we didn't know were two judges, Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia, were furious over the decision. Justice Thomas, with Scalia as a co-signer, filed an angry dissent that called out fellow judges for looking, quote, the other way as another federal district judge casts aside state law, instead of leaving laws in place until the Supreme Court rules. Justice Thomas went one step further, writing, this acquiescence may well be seen as a signal of the court's intended resolution of that question. This is not the proper way to discharge our Article 3 responsibilities, and it is indecorous, am I pronouncing that correctly? Indecorous, okay, thank you, for this court to pretend that it is. I'm not a lawyer. So, Heather,
just
Thomas and
played one on
Scalia are
TV.
basically saying that by making this ruling, the Supreme Court has shown their hand on its ultimate ruling over gay marriage. Would the Supreme Court been better just to not allow a lower court,
Absolutely.
or not to overrule the lower court?
They
I
should have
say.
just waited it out. Listen, this is the reality of our precedent. We wait it out. We wait until the final decision has been made. And I think that's what Thomas's problem was. It wasn't so much that they've tipped their hand, which is what everyone's focusing on. It's that we haven't, and he says this, we didn't give the people of the state of Alabama the deference that they deserve. What we normally do in these situations is we wait until there's a final ruling, and then we make the states then follow suit. But here they said, you don't have to wait till a final ruling. We know what it's going to be, wink, wink. Go ahead and do what you want to do. And it's inconsistent and it's not appropriate.
Rick, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, actually, Heather and I usually agree on these, but we're not now. You know, Justice Thomas's idea of turning aside is their idea, but I think the rest of the court would say they were supporting a federal judge who got it right. I don't know. What do you want these people to do? They can see what the law is. They can see that the judge had it right, the appellate court had it right, the lower court had it right. The law is unconstitutional. Why should they continue to stay
Because it's
when it's not legal?
Right now, the Sixth Circuit has said that it is not unconstitutional. And until they've made the final decision, you've got differing opinions.
Is Alabama in the Sixth Circuit?
No.
No.
But so you've got differing opinions. There is no law of the land, as it were, until that final decision
That's fine,
comes
but
down.
then if the final decision were to come down, then the law survives and there's no need for a stay. It'll be what it'll be. But I think they were absolutely right. And by the way, what they're bitter about is because this does tell you where the court's going.
Well, that's right.
It does tell you what the majority is going to do, and they're ticked off they don't have extra months to make some deals to change it.
I don't disagree with that, but I do think that we have to give deference to the states. And until it's final, and listen, that's consistent with what we've done. A year
What
ago,
about the
there
lower
was a
federal
very
courts? No deference
It
to
doesn't
them?
matter. They get deference when the final decision is made. But a year ago, the exact same thing happened in Colorado, and there the court stayed it until they made a final decision. That's the way the process works, and they just kind of jumped over a step here
I'm not sure you
because
should
they knew
wait
where it was
when we're
going.
talking about people's rights under the law and their
I
equal
understand
protection.
that argument, but when we start making exceptions to the rules, when you don't agree with it, it's going to be a problem. So that's why we have a set of rules to keep it consistent.
Majority's right.
Majority right
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree
right,
with that.
I understand
It's the
you.
process
It's the
that we have to
process
honor.
that's troubling. Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, you know, from a tactical perspective. No, actually, I'll tell you this. I do have a degree in political science. I'm not an attorney, but I have studied some of this stuff, and I have a degree in psychology. Where that comes in handy is looking at things like this. You know, when our Constitution was written and these things were created, it didn't cost as much to drag things through the legal system. But the Constitution was made to ensure freedom for all people and ensure our rights. And I just think the way these things like gay marriage, for instance, are being bogged down in the court system, what's happening is we're forgetting the thing which is actually on trial here, which is rights. Do people have their rights? Just because, and listen, I'm a Christian, and I know a lot of people, you know, from the Christian faith have a problem with this. I don't necessarily believe it should be called marriage, and I don't even get into that argument. What I do have a problem with, though, is if two people want to be together, they should have all the rights as anybody else that wants to be together. And I think that is something that needs to go through the court system, and it needs to go through quick. These were issues where it gets bogged
doesn't
down.
go that quick in real life.
But that's a problem that we have because we're talking about people's rights, which the Constitution ensures.
But I think it's a problem, but it's also a benefit. I agree with you 100%. And let it be said, I agree with the majority, what we're going to say here. But what it has done is allowed people who don't agree, even perhaps our president, to slowly come to the understanding that this is the way it's going to be. And it makes it a little bit easier. So in part, the time that it takes gives people time to sort of adapt to it.
And I agree with that with certain things, but when it comes to somebody's freedom or somebody's rights, I don't think it should be something
Do you know
that should
why
be
it's so
bogged
slow?
down.
And you're absolutely right. It is way too slow to get through the process. And every time the Republicans in Congress or in the Senate refuse to approve or give a hearing to a federal appellate judge or a federal district court judge that's been appointed by this administration, that's what bogs it down. We don't have
Because
the judges.
they want to get reelected. That's really the problem. And it happens on both sides of the aisle with different subjects.
Yeah, it does.
I just think when it comes to freedoms and ensuring
agree.
people's rights, there's certain things that should not be bogged down.
I want to get back for a moment to and focus on the states wanting to take back control from Washington. The Hill reported today state legislators are attempting to pull back power from the federal government by sponsoring over 200 bills that nullify numerous federal laws, including some firearms restrictions. So, Jonathan, are we just seeing a natural response from conservatives who are pushing back on the Obama administration?
Well, I think, again, whenever we have some of these issues that come up like this, there's going to be a natural pushback. I just find, you know, I'm often, and Rick and I, we actually agree on a lot of things. He's liberal, I'm conservative, but I'm also a realist, and I like to think of things that are going to find the solution to this. That's my military background. That's the way I look at things. What is effective? What keeps this country free and moving forward? And that's where I have a problem with the Republicans when they push back on Obama about some things. I am no fan of the Obama administration at all. I think they're incompetent.
But you think they should pick and choose their fights better?
I think they should, and I think also some things they shouldn't fight on. I think that they're more concerned with whether or not they
Like
get
when the
reelected.
Constitution's involved.
That's correct.
But right now, the states have, a lot of the states are really upset about federal overreach. And a lot of states are getting together and forming a convention and really talking about pushing this. And it goes back to Thomas's dissent in this case, because he says we're not giving the states the respect that they deserve. And if there's no respect on both sides, we're going to come up with a constitutional problem.
Is the High Court overstepping its bounds here?
No, clearly not. And what's interesting is, you know, as much as we all have this tendency to like states' rights, the boneheads that are being elected to these state legislators right now, who will pass these laws that have no chance of getting constitutional support, they're the reason that we shouldn't have this kind of control in the states, because they're doing a terrible job of it.
And that's the last word. Actually, it's not the last word. Indecorous was the word I was looking for before.
That's the last
And
word.
this is candor right here, okay? I'm not going to pretend I've ever heard of that word before. I've never seen that word before in my life.
You're an honest man.
Yes. Welcome, coming back in the Daily Wrap. White House scandal, it won't go away. This is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV.